Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, J.P. Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello, Denver. We are so excited to be here. We're excited to tell you a bit more about the Foundry for Builders program and to be a part of the Denver startup ecosystem. We moved our headquarters to Denver in the last year, and we're excited to call Denver home. Foundry for Builders, essentially we're offering our end-to-end Foundry solution that is deployed to major governments and enterprises worldwide, to early and growth stage companies so that they can build their business on Foundry from day one.
Hi everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. My name is Ryan Margolis and I'm the Product Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. As a committee, with Indigenous Peoples Day coming up next week, we felt it was important to start by acknowledging Indigenous people as the original owners and occupants of the land on which we reside, which is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, ethnic cleansing, forced removal, stolen land, and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor those who have stewarded this land throughout generations and all other Indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. Now, here we are, Denver Startup Week 2021. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At DSW, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of those identities. There is something for everyone at DSW. Thanks to all of our community members who submitted their amazing sessions, making this week everything it is. Also, a huge thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all, especially our product track sponsor, Palantir. DSW's product track focuses on all things bringing products to life, and certainly doing so with an entrepreneurial mindset. In these sessions, you'll hear from top product professionals about discovery, talking to customers, prioritizing your backlog, justifying new developments, inclusive design best practices, and much, much more. Thank you for being here. Please enjoy this session and the entire DSW week ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. We're just going to get set up right here. Okay. Can Christina, Jeremy, can you guys see my screen? All right, awesome.
Yep.
Perfect. Everybody, welcome to Balanced Teams, the secret sauce We are Laura, Christina, and Jeremy. We'll get a little bit more into introductions in a second, but wanted to thank you guys for joining us first thing this morning. Let me see. Resume. Okay, so we are part of a company here in Denver called Crafted. We are a consulting firm here in Denver, founded in 2017, and we work with clients from growth stage all the way up to enterprise, and we focus on iterative, high-value product delivery. We also focus on agile enablement and bringing our clients along with us during our process so that they're self-sufficient when we leave an engagement. That's where these three core values, inspiring teams, delivering products, and measuring outcomes come from. And we're excited to talk specifically around balanced teams, which is our specialty today. So before we get started, now that you know a little bit about Crafted, we'll jump a little bit further in.
Crafted is a balanced team consultancy that focuses on product development and delivery.
Build their software more efficiently. We like to try to help them have fun while they're doing it.
Crafted is a consultancy that works with clients to deliver the right product, and we do that by leveraging balanced teams to really marry the best aspects of engineering, design, and product management.
The product manager is all about the needs of the business, the product designer is all about the needs of the user, and then the engineering side is all about the technical feasibility. And so meshing those three perspectives together really are important to a great product.
At center is where that balanced team comes together and is the most efficient, effective form of the teams.
Two heads are better than one, and with us, three heads are better than one.
We think if you bring those three disciplines together in tight-knit collaborative units, they can validate, design, and ship a lot of valuable software for our users.
Balanced teams bring the most efficiencies to build software. So with just one discipline, sure, you can get it done, but is it really going to be the ultimate software that's easy to use, provides the right value for the organization and to the users themselves?
A lot of our clients and a lot of other SaaS companies, they have design, they have product management, they have engineering, but those teams and those people interact differently. And they're often in silos, they often handwork off kind of over a fence to each other. Where we bring those teams together 40 hours a week, they are the team delivering software versus different disciplines. So that's one big differentiator for how we build our teams and bring those teams together. The other one is, again, in that enablement model.
We'll oftentimes think about it as a spectrum between delivery and enablement. So with enablement, we will be working side by side with, as an engineer, I'll be working with some of their developers. We'll be pair programming, and we'll be teaching them some techniques.
We pair with the companies that we work with in the specific roles to help enable and teach them on the best practices so that not only are we delivering, but once we roll off, the teams are enabled to continue that momentum.
The enablement piece is really important to us. We think that we're all better together.
Crafted very much believes in building this stuff with you because our clients are the domain expert and we want their input all along the way. We also then, by pairing with our clients, you get that differentiator of enablement where we're teaching you how to do our tactics and our processes while we're building your software. We don't do coaching in a conference room or at a whiteboard. We do our coaching by actually building and shipping software with our clients.
If you would like to get in touch with Crafted and work together with a balanced team to help deliver your product, go to our website and we'll be in touch.
Perfect. So just a quick preview of Crafted and who we are and next. So allow us to introduce ourselves a little bit closer. So my name is Laura Pozzi. I am a senior product manager with Crafted. I'm originally from Philadelphia, moved to Denver almost exactly 3 years ago next week. I graduated from University of Richmond. I'm a proud Spider, so go Spiders. And I've been in product for about 6 years now. I started at a retail company as a product manager for a mobile app and have kind of learned all of my product skills from a similar company like Crafted and joined Crafted about 3 years ago as well. So excited to be here. And Christina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Laura. I'm Christina Linz. I'm a senior product designer for Crafted. I've been in Denver for 5 years. I was raised in Colorado and then went out east. I went to George Washington University in DC, and then kind of bounced around the country and ended up back in Denver. And I started my career as a freelancer, kind of doing all of the things, wearing all of the hats, and then decided I really wanted to focus in on product design. That's when I got into a few startups in Denver. And then before joining Crafted, I was at Pivotal Cloud Foundry.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Gustine. Yeah, I have met Laura and Christina prior to my time at Crafted, also at Pivotal. I've been a software engineer for about, 8 or 9 years now. Let's see, yeah, born in California, but moved out to Colorado pretty much immediately. So I think that qualifies me as native, and then joined the Navy for a little while, lived in Kansas, but keep on coming back to Colorado.
Nice, awesome. So let's go through a quick agenda, just a quick plug. If you do have questions throughout the chat, we'll make sure that we have some time at the end to address them. So go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring. So today we're just going to go through what balanced teams are, and then we want to get into the tactical stuff. So we want to teach you how to build the foundation, foster your relationships, and of course, create that secret sauce. Like I said, we'll then wrap up with some Q&A. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat. Okay, so balanced teams. Balanced teams are actually a thing. They have a .org behind it, so it must be official. This is, like we said, the foundation of everything that we do, and balanced teams really are focused on these two main things that are highlighted here. So it's focused on multidisciplinary collaboration, and then secondly, iterative delivery focused on customer value. So we'll dive into a little bit more about how this works and what is. But as you heard in the video, there's a team structure to it. Again, that's focused on this continuous collaboration. So the three perspectives that we focus on are product, engineering, and design, and those all make that center where the Crafted C is for a valuable product. So product is often coming in with the lens of, is this viable? Is this product viable for the business? Thinking about the business outcomes, the stakeholders, what the business needs. The designer is coming with the perspective of, is this desirable to the user? Bringing that customer value front and forward, and really being that representative in that perspective. And of course, engineering is always, assessing the technical feasibility. So figuring out, is what the product and design team want to do, is it technically feasible? Can we do this and, do it in a way that's low in risk and, highly valuable? There are plenty of benefits to working in a balanced team model. One, as we've already talked about, you get these three very diverse perspectives. These are the main ones that we focus on, but of course, constant collaboration also extends beyond these three perspectives. So to the marketing teams, sales teams, we want them to be brought in as well. And there's also shorter feedback loops. We'll talk a little bit about, again, more of the tactical stuff and how this works. But with all three of these disciplines kind of working together in one team and continuously collaborating, you're able to get to decisions quicker. There's no kind of waiting for approvals or, the next meeting to get the answers. You guys are all right there, being able to decide things right in the moment. It also reduced risks through minimized churn. So you're getting to the decisions quicker, you're all evaluating the risks from all three perspectives. And so you're able to reduce those risks and again, maximize efficiency. There's also then this am I present? Oh no. There's also this concept of continuous flow, and we'll dive into that a little bit next, but this also allows for just more efficiencies in output across the entire team. So these are just three of the quick benefits. Hopefully by the end of the talk, you'll be able to pick up a couple more. So one of the benefits I just mentioned is this concept of continuous flow. And in fact, your favorite ketchup company, at least mine from Pennsylvania, invented it actually all the way back in the 1800s. So we saw this in that show called The Food That Built America on the History Channel. But Mr. Heinz actually invented continuous flow in his factories way back when, we think in the 1800s. to eliminate handoffs. People were waiting around, boiling tomatoes, peeling tomatoes. And instead, he actually, by using continuous flow, was able to optimize production, reduce waste, and overall maximize efficiencies. So what is continuous flow? Agile development really spun out mostly from an engineering perspective and how to be better in engineering. This kind of takes it a step further, and it takes that agile mindset, but it expands it to the entire product development team. So rather than silos of communication in product and design and engineering, and ebbs and flows in work, and I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean there, with people waiting around, this actually is kind of dual tracks or triple tracks, I guess, with all three of research and delivery with a consistent throughput. So I'm not going to read the definition here for you, but the key things to focus on here is that it's an integration of all the elements of the production system throughout, and it's an optimally balanced production line with little waste, lowest possible costs, on time, and defect-free production. So wouldn't we all love our software to have all of those things? So that's what we're striving for, and that's what we're hoping continuous flow does for us. So we give these balanced team talks quite a bit, and often we're asked this similar question across the board. So, how often have we actually run into working on unbalanced teams? Their sense is that the success of any software company at this point in the history of software development would almost have to have this. And so we, as a consulting firm, see a variety of different teams, a lot of different team structures, a lot of different processes, et cetera. And what we see is that a lot of the companies and teams have the pieces, but they just aren't using them efficiently. So a lot of companies have product teams, design teams, engineering teams, but the setup and the structure is just not isn't as optimal for constant collaboration in this continuous flow from start to finish. And that's really the difference. So the team is the unit rather than the individual parts working in silos and handing them off. So we can kind of demonstrate what we mean by this. So most kind of other teams that we see are somewhat structured like this. So there's a product management team reporting to a VP or director of product. There's the engineering team. And then there's a usually small, if at all, product design team. And so usually, they are coordinated based on projects, meetings, deliverables, handoffs, but their primary teams are their product teams or their design teams or their engineering teams. And then they're just kind of like, moved around for what the needs are of the business at that time. Generally that project flow looks something like this. Since it's, designers and product and engineering in kind of these silos, it's a lot more handoffs and coordination. So, a little bit more looking like a waterfall where, the product team is building the requirements and analyzing the business problems, designs kind of working with product a little bit at the end there to catch up, and then they're doing the design, then they're kind of passing off to the developers who are starting to code while the designers are wrapping up their design. And likely the project flow looks, can you see my mouse, Christina? Okay, cool. And likely the project flow looks something like this, where there's more handoffs, there's more ebbs and flows. So you can see design might be really, really busy, and then they're kind of passing off to development, and development engineering gets really, really busy. And so there's just this kind of like wave cycle where everybody's kind of cooling off and then getting really busy as things are getting handed off. The balanced team, this is the structure that we advocate for. The team is actually just all three parts pointed at the same goals, the same deliverables. There aren't, other distractions. They are the team, and they are kind of that primary unit from start to finish. So they're put on a project. Everybody is assessing the business objectives. Everybody's kind of coming to the table with design solutions, and, talking about the, asking questions and stuff to get to that technical feasibility. And ideally, the continuous flow state looks something like this, where everybody is kind of equally, their workloads are kind of equally distributed throughout, because we're all constantly collaborating on the same things in the moment. We're able to increase those feedback loops and, lower the risk, decrease churn, all of the things that I stated above. So now that we're kind of familiar with the basics and the concept, we want to get into some of the tactical stuff and show you guys how to actually do it. So I'm going to pass it off to Christina, who's going to take it off and show you how to build your foundation.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, so in order to get your balanced team kind of working at the level of efficiency that Laura was just talking about, what we've realized and discovered in our work is there's really three pillars to the foundation of the team. And really successful companies know that people are the key to their success. And, you know, in the balanced team, that's really the relationships and communication that you have amongst each other. So in order to work properly together, you really need this supportive, healthy environment. And that's based on trust, transparency, and flexibility. So trust is really just the lack of ownership, like personal ownership, and more about team ownership, owning the outcomes, or owning the outcomes instead of, you know, being really focused on individual deliverables. Transparency is, you know, just open communication and knowledge sharing. And then flexibility is, you know, basically summed up into strong opinions loosely held. So we'll get into each one of these individually and talk a little bit more about the details there. Cool. So trust, you know, in order to trust each other, you have to make it a priority to, you know, foster your relationships among your team members. And I think going back to what Laura was saying about the difference between how a lot of companies are putting these three disciplines together and how the balanced team really works is, you know, a sense of continuity and consistency in that you're working on the same product together all the time. Like Laura said, there's not distractions of other teams and other people. So you can really like gel as a team a lot closer since you're 100% of the time together. Another thing, you know, we obviously recommend is, you know, getting to know each other socially, doing happy hours or whatever. You build those connections, and that really helps in the workplace as well. So the other thing that we talk about with trust is sharing successes and failures across the team. So that really means no one's the hero, no one's at fault. You know, a lot of places I think do retros, but having a blameless culture and a culture that really doesn't focus on failures but learnings instead of you know, your return on investments, like your return on learning. So you're never really wrong as long as you're kind of learning from what happened and not placing that on any individual. The next thing is alignment versus consensus. So I think a lot of teams think that everybody needs to agree on the end solution or decision or whatever is happening. And we think that, you know, a lot of times you're just not going to get to that point where everyone is like 100% on board and agrees with the direction. So we focus more on alignment. So we debate, and then, you know, the team decides and moves forward. And one key piece to that is the next bullet about removing bottlenecks. So really it doesn't come down to just one person. So it's not the lead engineer that gets to make the call, or it's not, you know, one stakeholder that gets to make the call. This is really the team's decision. And so that's where it comes down to, you can have someone who still kind of disagrees, but you're all willing to move forward with the direction you've chosen. And then the other piece around blockers is allowing teams to have the autonomy to make their own decisions. So really, really slows down the development process. If you're constantly having to go above you to get approval for things, you know, obviously we want stakeholders to be on board, and we'll talk about that in one of the next pillars. But you know, we don't want to have to wait on a lot of those smaller decisions. We just want the team to be trusted. So trust not only among the team, but within the organization down to the team. Cool. So the next one is transparency. So make it a priority to actively acknowledge and actively share knowledge across the team. So we talked about this in the video, and Laura talked about this with continuous flow, that, you know, shortening the feedback loop really speeds up your process. And what stakeholder doesn't want their software delivered faster? Everybody does. So one of the key ways and best ways to do that is really like sit next to each other, like really eliminate that handoff that Laura was talking about, and share all of that information. Knowledge is power, and in everyone's hands, each individual discipline can do what they need to do with that information based on, their role on the team. I know we're in a remote world still for the most part. So for us, that looks like being on Slack all day, or, having all these touch points throughout the day, if that's stand up, or, meeting at the end of the day to talk about what happened, or just, pinging someone to get on the phone quickly to just kind of talk through some things, so that, we're not waiting for, the team meeting in 2 days. And when we're in person in the office, you just kind of turn around and talk to the person next to you. That's something that we see a lot with our clients. We kind of try to bring them all together instead of having them sit in different places in the building or in the room. Create an environment where people are available for quick access to each other, kind of what I was just talking about. And then the other key to transparency is up the chain. So to stakeholders, creating a cadence that, everybody's sort of agreed upon. We do a lot of stakeholder interviews at the beginning to make sure that, they're aligned and they know what we're moving forward with. But you'll really, going back to the trust piece, your stakeholders will trust you a lot more if you go to them and inform them, and you have a regular process for giving them information about your progress, and, kind of communicating any blockers or anything to them. If you aren't being transparent with them, they're much more likely to come knocking on your door asking what's going on, and much more likely to not give the team that autonomy that they really need to move quickly. Cool. And then the next one is flexibility. So seek diverse opinions and consider multiple perspectives. Obviously, from what you've heard so far, this is really crucial to the balanced team across design, product management, and engineering. However, this also, applies to the rest of the organization or the company. So one of the things that we really love to do and see a lot of success with is bringing in sales, bringing in customer success, bringing in marketing, bringing in these other teams that really have a lot of great ideas and usually a lot of great data for the product team. And we kind of, consider their opinions and ideas and make sure that they're feeling heard. That's, kind of later down on this list. Listening is obviously really important, and that empathy, but they want to have a great product as well. Building a great product makes their lives a lot easier. So considering their perspective is really important. And I know that, if we talk about silos, that's also something that gets really siloed in companies. Like those teams are usually pretty separate from the product team. So it's really important to include them in, design studios, or do interviews with them, or whatever you can do to kind of get their perspective. Hold the decision lightly. So this is what I said, that flexibility really just comes down to strong opinions loosely held. And, if you have a great balanced team, obviously you have really skilled and talented people on that team. And so, designers are going to have their opinions about what the best thing for the user is. Engineers are going to have their opinion about the best way to, technically approach a problem. We don't like to really think about being right or wrong when you get new information. Like I said, you learn from that, and then you adjust, your direction going forward. And I think the blameless culture really, helps with this, that no one made a wrong decision. We just made the best decision we could at the time. And, we just go into it with the attitude of, this product is always evolving. And, the team has to kind of compromise. That's why there's a Venn diagram where we meet in the middle. And that's where that compromise kind of lives. So, the last pieces here, listening and empathy, seem pretty obvious. But I do think that having that balanced team, that core team that works together all day, every day on the same product, really helps with the listening and empathy. You're kind of building those relationships from the ground up, and learning to build that empathy muscle is not just important for user experience designers. I know that's the world that we all live in, but it's important for the rest of the team, and they all build empathy for users and other members of the company as well. Cool. So the next piece we're going to talk about is fostering relationships on a more specific level. So we'll talk about how PMs work with the other two disciplines, how engineers work with the other two disciplines, and how designers work with the other two disciplines, and the things that go well and the things that don't go well between those relationships. So first we'll get into the designer perspective. So what can PMs do that really make designers' lives easier and really make the balanced team successful in this relationship? And then what happens when things are, not working so well? What causes that? So the designer PM relationship works the best when you use research and best practices to decide on your product and design direction. So like Laura said, going back to the continuous flow, we're really working hand in hand from the very beginning, instead of having a PM that, if you look on the other side of this table, when it falls apart, instead of having a PM who makes choices on their own or makes choices with a stakeholder and then just goes and tells the designer what to do, or instead of even, engaging the designer at all, just goes to an engineer and says, hey, go make this thing. You're really working as a partnership and deciding from the beginning on, what the product is going to look like, and making those decisions together. So the next one is to give attention to the future of the product at the same time as what you're doing right now. And this can be really, really challenging. PMs are really busy people and can oftentimes have their heads kind of buried in a backlog, but it's really important for the designer to stay ahead of the engineering team and the roadmap, essentially. So what's important there is to have the product manager able to focus on what's coming next and not just managing the backlog and what's happening right now. So that really does take, kind of a bit of divided attention or time, but it makes the team a lot more efficient, and you get a lot more done in the long run, since you're not doing these like handoffs where design goes up and then goes down because, now product is executing and engineering is executing and design is just kind of waiting because there's no time to figure out what's supposed to come next. Specifically call out information gaps and use their toolkit to surface what's needed to move forward. So this happens a lot with us as consultants, in that, our clients have a lot of that contextual knowledge and knowledge about the product. And so the PM can be really valuable in going to these other teams and getting the data or getting the information about the users or whatever we need in order to make these design decisions or product decisions to kind of move forward. And then clearly conveying design and user needs to engineers through stories and other types of communication. So one of the key parts of being a great PM is writing a great story, but obviously that helps everyone when those are clear and, the Figma files or whatever are connected properly to the story, just whatever information needs to be there, make sure it's there for the engineers. So it kind of slows it down when they don't have the assets and stuff that they need. So I already talked about the first one about what happens when things aren't going well. Another big one that really drives designers crazy, I can speak from experience, is not pushing back on stakeholder ideas that aren't supported by research or best practices, or succumbing to the shiny object syndrome of people that are outside of the product team. So really honing in on your North Star and what are we building and why are we building it and who are we building it for? And then constantly communicating that back, and then really expressing kind of the pitfalls of not kind of pursuing the thing that you've started with, unless there's some really big reason to not continue in the direction that you started on. A lot of teams will kind of get going on something and then drop it for something new, whatever the new exciting thing is. So that can be really disruptive for design and engineering. So if the PM kind of really communicate with stakeholders, the downsides to that approach, that's helpful. And then don't communicate about story priorities. And so engineers pick up stories with potentially unfinished designs or unanswered questions and things like that. So obviously making sure that the backlog is in the proper order and that we're having the right meetings to make sure engineers know what they're supposed to be working on next and not picking up something that's not quite ready yet. Cool. And then working with engineers, this is a relationship that I think isn't fostered as much at a lot of companies, where, you know, design is kind of in the beginning and then engineering is kind of at the end of a process, and they don't, you know, there's a lot of throwing stuff over the wall and less communication here. And so this is something we really try to focus on and make sure that engineering is brought along in the process from the beginning, so that they know, you know, why we're building this, who we're building it for, and that, you know, we sit together while this is being built. Obviously not 100% of the time, but, you know, there's a lot of collaboration there. So what works really well between designers and engineers is when engineers, you know, really voice their opinions in design reviews. They ask questions, they present some different technical options for achieving what the designer and product manager have kind of come up with as far as the ideal state for the product. They give alternatives and we kind of compromise. So this looks like, you know, I have a design that I've made, and Laura and I think that this is a great direction for the product. But Jeremy may say, you know, I think that's going to take us weeks and weeks, but here's an option that might take us a week. It looks a little bit different, but how do you feel about that? And that's kind of how that back and forth compromise goes. It also works really well between engineers and designers when engineers call edge cases to consider. So because they're in there, you know, actually coding the software, they see a lot more of that point I always call where the rubber meets the road, and what is that actually going to look like for this user. And so they can really point out a lot of those edge cases, and then they can talk about how often those happen, how common it might be that people run across this problem. So you know how important it is to solve that early on versus, you know, maybe that really is just, you know, a little bit of a one-off situation, and we can, you know, deprioritize that. The other thing that designers really love with engineers is when they pay attention to the details. Oh, you skipped me one, sorry. I was just reading from that slide, Laura. Is when engineers pay attention to the details of the design during the execution. So that means like they notice if there's some regression in alignment of something, or, you know, they're paying attention to the font styles and those kinds of things, and kind of pointing things out to designers. And, you know, one of the things I have as far as when things fall apart is if engineering doesn't get feedback from designers before shipping the product. So that's essentially what we call design QA, but the designer and the engineer sit down and make sure that everything is working the way it should and looks the way it should. And then, you know, kind of hashing out some of those details at the very end, like the alignment and font styles and some of those visual aspects. And then another great thing for engineers is to have empathy for the user and develop with them in mind. So that means that they know why they're building this. And I think that helps them a lot, as you know, Jeremy will talk about in a minute. And I think I've probably covered everything else here as far as when things fall apart. You know, obviously making design changes without communicating that. You never want to see your product in production and wonder how it got, how something got there.
Perfect. So I'm going to go over some of the PM perspectives and what I have seen the best work in balanced teams from designers and engineers. So, you know, it works best with PM and design when the designers are willing to show design concepts. We say early, ugly, and often. So even from like the very first moment when we're sketching or something like that, they're going to be really ugly. They're probably not going to make sense. But that's where, you know, we can actually affect the most change and talk about the problems right from the inception, rather than waiting until the designer gets, you know, kind of further into wireframes. And then we talk about it and we're like, wait, this isn't going to work, or that's not going to work. This isn't a requirement. So we can actually like affect that change really early, ugly, and often, as long as, you know, they're willing to share and work with it. Also, when designers consider multiple perspectives while solutioning. So the designer is bringing to the table the voice of the user and really, you know, is the expert in that customer perspective. But the product teams and the engineering teams have those other perspectives. And so, you know, opening and listening to all three perspectives, and we can really kind of solution for that entire product rather than just maybe one of the needs of the business. So, you know, considering those multiple perspectives, also listening to sales, marketing, those needs as well, you know, again, early on in the process if possible. We love to say that, our design team really leverages the best design concepts. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Google has done a really great job in creating libraries that we all use and are very familiar with every day. There are tons of, design libraries out there. And there are a lot of concepts that are just kind of innate to users. So there's no need to redesign an uploader that we all kind of know the basics of. And really then we can focus on the newer problems and the problems that are specific to that specific project. Also, as a product manager, I love the flexibility to not be pixel perfect. There's always a lot going on. We're always short on time, resources, money. And so, having that flexibility to be, good enough and close enough rather than that 100% UI hardening. That's not to say we don't always have time to go back, but we want to get it most of the way there, looking good, to be able to deliver quickly and iteratively. And then if we have time, we can go back and make it pixel perfect. But usually the consumers aren't going in and checking and making sure that it's exactly right where it should be. Design and PM relationships really fall apart when, again, they work in silos, won't show things until they're perfect. I guess that's kind of the opposite of what I was saying earlier. The other thing we've seen is, when designers can't pull themselves out of a research phase to get to that iterative delivery. So, there's always questions to be asked. There's always, rabbit holes to go down. And so finding that limit between research and delivery, and usually, the PMs and designers are working closely together to do that. But, sometimes designers would prefer to do months and months of research. But, the reality is at some point we have to deliver some solutions. Also, there's, if they aren't flexible in breaking down designs into iterative releases. So of course we all want everything in the moment. And so, but, it's our job to make sure that we can actually deliver things. And so looking at the broader picture and breaking things down into iterative delivery, into MVPs, which I know has become kind of a dirty word in the industry. But, breaking things out so that we can get to that, that perfect product, but do it in a way that we can get there iteratively so we can release the product out to customers earlier. And then of course, anytime there's defensiveness with critique, that extends anywhere across the team, but generally the designers get the brunt of it all, of the design critique. So keeping a low ego, open mind, considering those other perspectives and alternate solutions is a great thing to have. And then PMs with engineers, we obviously work incredibly closely together. And so this relationship works best when the engineers are able to effectively break down and explain complicated technical concepts. We all know that not every PM is a technical PM. And so, it makes our job easier if we're not technical to be able to go and talk to stakeholders and explain what the blockers are, or explain what problems we're having, explain the why, when the developers can explain things and break things down into layman's terms. That also, for any engineers, it also helps the PMs who aren't technical get more familiar with those patterns, so that in the future we don't have to kind of go down that route. Again, engineers and PMs, if they collaborate throughout the process to help assess that technical feasibility, designers and product managers can have all the ideas in the world and really, go down and create this giant crazy product. And then, we get to the engineering and they're like, no, none of this is possible. So really coming in with that critical eye early on and, challenging that product, understanding the perspectives that product and design are coming from the business and the customer. Again, we love to have engineers sit in on user interviews and stakeholder interviews so that they can understand that full picture and understand the why. That helps to inform, their how. Also, when engineers, it's great when they transparently communicate problems and blockers. We really can't help solve what we don't know is happening. And a lot of times engineers suffer in silence. And so, getting those blockers and problems out on the table early and often, generally they're ugly, so that we can solution and get them in front of the right people, talk about why, why the project might be delayed or something like that, is always really helpful. And then I mentioned this a little bit, but that desire to empathize with the user and the business for that well-rounded understanding, it really only helps them inform the code, understanding where we're going, the roadmap, so that they can think about that broader picture and where they're going. The relationship falls apart when engineers are too rigid in that agile process and loses sight of the work that needs to be done. A lot of times we get, stiff in ceremonies and that type of stuff. And so, and we lose track of just like delivering software because we're, being a little bit too rigid in that process. So having that flexibility, working with the team, is always great. It also falls apart when engineers prioritize that architecture over user and business needs. That's not to say architecture is not important. It's obviously the foundation of everything. But again, similar to what I was saying about designers and kind of them going and doing months and months of research, like there is rabbit holes in architecture. And so again, pulling themselves out and figuring out that happy medium to get us to where in a good spot where that architecture will allow us to get started. And then we can continue to refactor and kind of iterate from there. The worst is when developers develop in a black box with few iterative deliverables. Everything stays on their local machine. We can't see, we can't test, we can't release. The risk only increases from there. And so again, kind of focusing on this consistent iterative delivery, only decreases the risk and allows us to get a lot further, see the problems where they exist and iterate from there. Finally, this one's a little bit funny, but we often hear out in the industry, engineers would be much better off without PMs. And so, coming to the table with that perspective of not seeing the PM as a nuisance, but rather as an advocate and a teammate, it only obviously helps foster that relationship. So we'll turn it over to Jeremy for the engineering perspective. You're on mute, Jeremy.
Thank you very much. Yes, for engineers' perspectives of product managers, this works best when the PMs help manage the relationship between engineers and the stakeholders. They communicate engineering constraints to leadership and articulate business needs to engineering. I think the big point there is that a lot of times engineering can be a little bit isolated and separated from the stakeholders. So really like establishing bidirectional empathy there is very helpful for everybody in the process. They help serve as a buffer to protect the team so that they can minimize distractions and work efficiently. I think this is especially true in organizations or projects where there's multiple teams collaborating on a given project. There are going to be a lot of needs from one team to the other, and really filtering all that kind of stuff through the PM is incredibly helpful. They're able to suggest common product-based solutions to problems that engineering may not have considered. So I think something that happens with engineers quite often is they'll encounter some sort of technical problem or series of technical problems as a result of what's been asked to implement. And so having PMs and designers, for that matter, suggest kind of product-based solutions, maybe pared down features or slightly modified features to accomplish the business problem. That is definitely very helpful. And then the engineers can really avoid a lot of those technical hurdles. Understands the software development process well enough to be able to strategize how to organize work streams, story priority, et cetera. So depending on the size of the team, the different skills of the members on the team, that can really determine like how the delivery of the features is ordered and things like that. And evolve the product just beyond getting to deadlines. So I think this is one of those things that is, again, similar to negotiating things between technical teams and stakeholders. Just making sure we solve the right business problems at the right time can sometimes reduce some of that pressure. It falls apart when PMs bend to the pressure of unrealistic business desires. It's always deadlines, of course, and then impose that pressure on the delivery team. So, of course, that happens a lot. Businesses have big goals that they want to achieve. They got a lot of competition from other people in the industry. So things need to get done pretty quickly. But a lot of times, that pressure will just come from on high, roll downhill, and, this might result in a death march to get things done. So PMs are in a super critical position there because they can really, communicate some of the technical problems to stakeholders, communicate business needs down to engineers, and really make sure we're doing the right thing. They're unwilling to effectively communicate technical problems, realities to the business. I think that pretty much goes right back to what I said, especially the unable to communicate that portion. If they can't really communicate kind of the marriage of the business and technical problems to stakeholders, then it's hard for stakeholders to establish empathy with engineering. And they don't understand user needs well enough to be able to strategize story prioritization. So yeah, I think there's a good things to understand about what the users need and when they need it. And it can really alleviate some of the difficulty on engineering to deliver stories in a certain order. And as far as designers, it works best when we strive for great rather than perfect. We can make style tweaks as we go. And so, yeah, this is great working with someone like Christina because she definitely understands the fact that we can deliver things iteratively. We can get the first kind of thing that's going to deliver some user value up and tweak it as we go. Have frequent design reviews with engineering to help with early identification and difficult implementations. Yeah, this is super important. Kind of like Christina was saying, sometimes in some organizations, things just get thrown over the wall and there's not a lot of communication between those two disciplines. But when there is, it's great because you can identify some of those inevitable problems a lot earlier. They're able to help engineering understand the product they are building and modifying and the ways that it's used by users. So this is another big one. I think I said previously that the engineering teams are frequently isolated. So the less isolated they are, the better. And I think still getting them to have more empathy with the users is super important. That'll just make sure that they have that perspective when they're building the right thing. They move faster than engineering and have visions of where the product should go. And so, yeah, I think that what that means is, they're going to be a lot further ahead in the process. They're doing a little bit more research. Things are going to get implemented quite, maybe a couple sprints or months or whatever after that idea has come up. So they really have a better picture of where the end goal is. They keep engineering in the loop regarding users' pain points and especially the things that users enjoy. So yeah, that's great. I mean, engineers are always hearing about the problems, the things that are on fire, things that are going down, things that the users hate, but letting us know about the things that they love is also fantastic, giving us some good news every now and then. So it falls apart when they are too fixated on initial designs to iterate based on technical constraints. So again, this is basically just making sure that we deliver things in incrementally, get little small chunks out there. And that just helps everything get delivered a little bit more quickly. They're unable to communicate how users use an application. How can engineering know how to test it effectively? I think this is a very big one. Sorry, give me just a second here. Closing an application. Okay. Yeah, how can engineering know how to test it effectively? I think engineers, one of the big kind of perspectives that we test from is from the user perspective. So, obviously that's easy to empathize with when we know exactly how the users are using it. We can test those kind of critical user paths and make sure that that piece of the application is going to be very robust and trustworthy. They don't attempt to understand the difficulty of implementing a particular design. So this is definitely another one of those symptoms of throwing things over the wall. So the earlier that communication can happen in the process, the better. And they only consider the happy path and don't consider edge cases. So yeah, it's definitely great to have mocks and designs and stories and a plan for getting a happy path through the system, but there are edge cases. There's going to be bad things that happen. Users could do them purposely or accidentally. We want to at least anticipate some of those and make sure that we take care of those problems.
Awesome. So thanks, Jeremy. So just to wrap up, we want to talk about how to create your secret sauce. So a couple of steps to transformation. So one, identify those coworkers who you know, are excited for the change and organize yourselves into a true balance team. Usually, you know, you need some sort of stakeholder buy-in. This lends itself to number 2. So align with a stakeholder advocate who's bought into this experiment. So start small and, you know, use our model to then obviously iterate and expand out. But having that stakeholder backing, explaining why this is helpful and, you know, proving that it can work with a small team, then can, you know, expand out to the rest of the organization. Walk, you know, we like to say crawl before you walk before you run. You know, number 3, intentionally create your team culture. So within that balanced team, really focus on those 3 pillars that we talked about: the transformation or transparency, flexibility, and trust. So really kind of focusing on that team culture so that you guys can, you know, be as successful as possible. Number 4, pick a right-sized problem to solve. Again, use it as an experiment and set yourself up for success. Don't choose, you know, replatforming to a new, you know, a new solution or something like that. Pick a right-sized problem to, again, set yourself up for success. Test out the waters. Transformation doesn't happen overnight, and you guys are you're gonna need some time to kind of figure out how this all works. We have another talk around a 3-week product sprint. We'll show you where you can find that, but that's a great way to, again, if you are trying to prove in a small amount of time the value, the 3-week product sprint is a great way to quickly do something like that. 3 weeks is usually you know, a sprint and a half if you're working in that agile method. So, you know, again, kind of starting small. And then number 6, really communicate those wins and learnings outside the core balance team. So, you know, advocate for yourselves and really show how working in this experiment or this balance team is working really well, and start to build advocates across other teams. We have this rubric for success. So, you know, with informing stakeholders, you want to show incremental progress over 3, 6, 9 weeks. Those are kind of those 3-week product sprint increments, obviously communicating more throughout those weeks, but you know, those are good incremental chunks to really show progress. Aligning on product vision and direction with stakeholders, and then learning and collaborating with those business counterparts. So getting sales, marketing, all those other you know, stakeholder teams involved. Engage with users. So conduct quantitative and qualitative research with users, and take it the step further and incorporate that user feedback into decisions. We want to measure and report on the value of incorporating this feedback. You know, again, kind of evangelizing your wins across the company and to those who matter. We want to ship value, so efficiently and quickly ship valuable products, get that product out there, you know, reduce the time to churn solutions and start from scratch, and then measure beyond velocity points and vanity metrics, really find valuable OKRs where you can actually measure your project progress. And then finally, have that healthy team dynamic. So collaborate on ideas rather than siloed decisions, strive for that blameless, egoless culture that Christina was talking about, and make sure that members feel heard, valued, and bought into the direction. Just a few more slides. You know, Miro is one of our favorite tools, and they also kind of advocate for this collaborative culture. And so, you know, we love this quote: all people are different with their own talents, personality, and way of working. When we work together, it can be hard to be aligned. So we set out to solve this problem. And that leads us into, you can screenshot this. We also have this on our website, but these resources that we really believe in around, you know, making a successful balanced team. Our 3-week product sprint as well. And then some of our favorite tools. So collaborating in Miro, obviously Slack and Zoom, we've all become very comfortable with over these past couple of years, and shared docs. We love Figma, usertesting.com, and Optimal Workshop. And then from the technical perspective, also using Figma and Lucid Charts. So we have a couple of questions in our last 2 minutes, but before we dive into them, we obviously wanted to give another big thank you out to Denver Startup Week, and, you know, giving us the opportunity to meet you all, and hopefully next year it'll be in person. If you guys want to follow us, we are on this Colorado product slack.com, with the hashtag #GetCrafty. So we're often doing business hours and that type of stuff there, where we're always available for questions. And if we run out of time here, we can follow up there. I think that's it. So we had 2 questions. We have 1 minute left. The first question was, how do we handle instances where there are 1 or more team members that seriously see a decision as wrong or problematic? We addressed this a little bit with the pillars and the flexibility slide, but really in a collaborative culture, we should all be putting our concerns and risks out on the table and talking about ways that we can mitigate them. So this really shouldn't, if there's somebody that sees it as a seriously wrong decision, understanding before that decision is made why they're seeing it that way, and understanding that perspective, and then hopefully, in an ideal world, coming towards some type of collaborative solution. We also have a question around, how does this framework balance the need for collaboration with the need for deep work time? Christine, I saw that you answered that. Do you want to jump in there?
Sure. Yeah, I think this one really resonates with me. And I know each of the disciplines needs that heads down kind of quiet time, but it can be distracting to kind of have a meeting here for an hour, 30 minutes in between a meeting, here for an hour, and you don't really get enough like solid time to dig into a problem. I experienced this, a lot, especially in the beginning of a project, where you're really trying to like work through some of those solutions or analyze some data, some research and things like that. So what we found is, if you as a team can kind of block some time, if you agree to meetings in the mornings or vice versa, or, you have a block in the middle of the day so that you can kind of have some heads down time. I think also just going back to the communication and trust, saying to your teammates, hey, I'm going to go heads down for a few hours. If you don't hear from me, that's why. I'm just kind of focusing in. I think being in a remote world, obviously you just need to find a good quiet space. And I think that was harder when we were in the office. Then I guess it depends on your remote work setup, but also just kind of removing yourself for a little while and just communicating that, I think helps for us.
Cool. Perfect. And we have one last question that's come through, and I know we're a little bit over time, but question comes through. How do you decide which software projects to take on? I'm not sure if you're speaking about Crafted specifically or just in general as a balanced team. If it's about the balanced team, generally it comes down to priorities, company priorities, but making sure that, there are the time and the resources available to tackle those. So, we're big fans of a 2x2 matrix, even at that like company level, and really just kind of honing in on what's going to deliver the biggest value, for both the business and the customer with, we like to say the lowest effort. That's kind of always that top quadrant. So where there's the lowest risk effort, kind of figuring out the problems, breaking them down. If you're talking about Crafted, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to work with you. And, it's a mutual decision between both companies. So, please don't hesitate to reach out. We love, we worked across a variety of companies, industries, disciplines, and, would love to learn more about what you're doing. There aren't any other questions. We'd like to thank you guys for your time and attention and questions. Again, please don't hesitate to connect with us on LinkedIn or on the Colorado product channel. We'd love to get to know you more and chat further. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.